So this is such circumstances, every believer, in such circumstances, every believer can trust God and pray for the power to endure it. Sometimes we get caught in situations where we are continually confronted by temptations that we cannot avoid. Some temptations come up every day in our lives, and it is important that we be able to withstand them. Now, Paul counsels the believers under such distresses to remember that no temptation has overtaken you such as common to man, but God is faithful, who will not allow you to be tempted beyond that which you can or are able to stand, but with the temptation will provide a way of escape, that you may be able to endure it. 1 Corinthians 10:13. Until he provides a way of escapement, the Lord provides power to resist the temptation. The third circumstances is persecution. Persecution is that affliction which we suffer for Christ's sake. Persecution is never pleasant. But in the Beatitudes, Jesus says and promises that God will give us a double blessing when we suffer when we suffer for his sake. And he says, rejoice and be glad, for your reward in heaven is great. For so they persecuted the prophets who were before you, in Matthew 5:10. So it's going to be normal for a Christian to suffer persecution. It's just the normal everyday life. That's going to happen. Now, because we in the United States have great liberties, we have escaped a lot of the suffering. But there are many people around the world who are suffering in jails because they are persecuted. The next obstacle which Paul mentions is famine, and it's often a result of persecution. When Christians are discriminated against in employment and cannot buy enough food to eat, and that happens a lot of times. Many believers have been imprisoned for their salvation, and many have starved to death. There are many prisoners in jails in China and other places around the world because they are Christians. The next one is nakedness. Now, this does not refer to complete nudity, but to the destitution in which a person cannot adequately clothe themselves. It's a suggestion of poverty type things. Next one is peril. And peril is simply to expose to danger in general, danger from treachery and danger from mistreatment. And then the sword. And the sword here that Paul talks about is like a large dagger, and it was frequently used by assassins because it was easy to conceal. It was the symbol of death and suggests the idea of being murdered rather than dying in battle. Paul was not speaking here of these afflictions in a theoretical terms or by second hand. No, Paul experienced these threatening ideas. Speaking of Jewish Christians who claimed they were being persecuted, Paul says, are they servants of Christ? I am talking like I am out of my mind. I am even more so. With much greater laborers, with far more imprisonments, with more severe beatings, facing death 3 times. 5 times I received from the Jews 40 lashes less 1. 3 times I was beaten with rods. Once I received a strong stoning. 3 times I suffered shipwreck. A day and a night and a day I spent adrift in the open sea. I have been on journeys many times, in danger from rivers, in dangers from robbers, in dangers from my own countrymen, in dangers from Gentiles, in danger in the city, in danger in the wilderness, in danger at sea, in danger from false brothers, in hard work and toil, through many sleepless nights, in hunger and thirst, many times without food and cold, without enough clothes. 2 Corinthians 11:23-27. Paul was speaking firsthand. He experienced persecution from every front. Quoting from the Septuagint, which is a Greek translation of the Old Testament, Paul quotes Psalm 44:22, and he says, "Just as it is written, for thy sake we are being put to death all the day long. We are considered as sheep to be slaughtered." In other words, Christians should not be surprised when they face persecution. It's a way of life. Before Paul wrote this epistle, God's faithful people had suffered for centuries, not only at the hands of the Gentiles, but also at the hands of their fellow Jews. They experienced mockings, scourgings, yes, also chains and imprisonment. They were stoned. They were sawn in two. They were tempted. They were always put to death with the sword. They went about in sheepskins and goatskins, being destitute, afflicted, and ill-treated, men of whom the world is not worthy, wandering in deserts and in mountains and in caves and in holes in the ground. Hebrews 11:36, which we know as the chapter of the martyrs. The cost of faithfulness to God has always been high. Jesus declared, "He who loves his father or mother more than me is not worthy of me. And he who loves his son or daughter more than me is not worthy of me. And he who does not take up his cross and follow after me is not worthy of me. He who has found his life shall lose it, and he who has lost his life for my sake shall find it." Matthew 10:27-39. When Paul talked to his beloved Timothy, he says, "Indeed, all who desire to live godly in Jesus Christ will be persecuted." 2 Timothy 3:12. If a professing Christian turns his back on the things of God or lives a promiscuous life in sin, he proves that he never belonged to Christ at all. Such people have not lost their salvation, and he never had it. About such nominal Christians, John says, "They went out from us, but they were not really belonged to us. Because they had not belonged to us, they would have, if they had belonged to us, they would have remained with us. But they went out from us to demonstrate that all of them did not belong to us." 1 John 12:19. In other words, John is saying that the people who fade away, and we all know people who seem to be on fire for the Lord one day and drift away and you never hear about them again.